You're listening to the Future Tech Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies such as artificial intelligence, stem cells, 3D printing, gene editing, Bitcoin, blockchain, the microbiome, quantum computing, virtual reality, and exploring space are much closer than you might think. In fact, many early versions of these technologies are in play right now, and the companies that are using these technologies are the focus of this podcast. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a thorny medical problem. Remember, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and tell your friends about it. Thank you. Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Future Tech and Future Tech Health podcast. I have Joshua Perry. He's a keto consultant. Maybe most importantly, he's a brain tumor survivor. He's a former professional athlete, survivor, and a coach. So he's got a really super interesting story, an amazing story. So Josh, thanks for coming. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I appreciate you having me on, Richard. And thanks for the love and support. It means the world to me to be able to share my story and my perspective. So I appreciate it.
I'm sure you're probably tired of telling it, but if you wouldn't mind, can you give some background on what's happened to you?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess from the beginning, originally born and raised Cape Cod, Massachusetts, into school sports like most kids were back then, around where I lived, and moved into high school and stopped playing school sports to pursue landscaping as a career option to own my own business one day, as well as BMX competition. And then come junior year, I was in a co-op program in the school, going to work for 2 weeks to get credit and earn money, and then academics the other 2 weeks. But also come junior year, I was progressing into the professional level of competition now, and got an ultimatum one day from the boss to pick between working for him or pursuing the route of BMX. And it was a no-brainer for me, and went all in, and actually dropped out of high school to do so, the support of my family, and moved 14 hours south to North Carolina to pursue BMX with Dave Muir and the other professionals. And, fast forwarding, there was a lot of success, and that meant freedom to me, living on my own as a teenager and then moving into my young adult years. And not the healthiest lifestyle, a lot of late nights partying and drinking and chasing girls and not sleeping as much or as well as I should have been. And then just training all day the next day and doing it again and again. And at this time, it was 2009. And it was the year I won my first pro contest, rode X Games, left the country for competition the first time, on TV, sponsors paying me to live my dream, basically. And at the same time, I was experiencing these debilitating headaches and migraines to the point where my vision was going. I was losing vision, but I was also vomiting from the pain and the nausea that was occurring. And every time, it was like 5 times, I think, throughout that year, I'd gone into the emergency room and urgent care and just complaining of these headaches and vision loss and vomiting, and kept asking, like, hey, shouldn't I get a scan? X-ray, CAT scan, MRI, something to look inside my brain because something doesn't feel right. And they kept saying, no, like I was 20 to 21, depending on the part of the year. And they're like, no, you're young, you're healthy, you're a professional athlete, you're in shape, the blood work checks out, it's fine. Like, you just have headaches. It's quite normal today. So here are some pain pills, come back if you need more. And that was the go around every time. And I never took them just because I had a traumatic experience when I was younger, and it led to vomiting. It was actually the flu, not the aspirin I took. But the last time I went in towards the end of that year, it was so bad. I said, screw it, let me take them. And it was thankfully I wasn't driving on the way home because I just started vomiting in the car and had to pull over. And at this point, they're telling me I'm fine. Here's just take some pain pills. But I'm on the side of the road on my hands and knees now, vomiting so violently there's nothing but blood coming out. I'm surrounded by my own blood, thinking like, man, like they told me I'm fine, but like I feel like I'm dying. And I just pushed through like anything else I'd experienced in my life. And I just started to accept suffering as a part of my reality, because some days it was fine. I could say, I could ride and I wasn't throwing up. My vision was okay. And some days I couldn't really see well. I couldn't even see my hand in front of my face without seeing like 5 of them. And then some days the pain was just so bad I couldn't even get out of bed. And, so I just pushed through. I did what I knew I had to do to live my dream, and I wasn't going to let something stop me. And was a couple weeks later after that last visit where I was trying a new trick for the first time on the real ramp. We had like a foam pit where we learn tricks into safely, like gymnastics do, and I went and tried it on the real ramp after I felt comfortable, and it was a smaller ramp than I was used to, and so I overcompensated the rotation and the flip of the trick, and ironically over rotated and fell and hit my head and got a concussion. And so now it was required that I get an MRI to make sure there was no swelling or bleeding, no traumatic brain injury symptoms, things like that.
The concussion was lucky. It was a good thing.
It's crazy because I thought as I was driving there by myself, just turned 21 a few months prior. It's now March of 2010. My birthday was in November. And I'm driving there thinking, I'm just getting an MRI to follow up from a concussion. And they're basically just tell me, don't ride your bike for 2 or 3 weeks. Like that was my mentality. And as I'm sitting in the doctor's office by myself waiting, he walks in and he's like, hey, we have the report and, there's no swelling, there's no bleeding. So, that checks out. And I remember standing up, getting ready to leave. And I was like, all right, so how long until I can ride? And he was like, no, you need to sit down. And I was like, well, what's going on? He's like, well, you have an abnormal scan. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He said, well, there's something in your brain that shouldn't be there. And I remember laughing out loud, like asking, like, well, what do you mean there's something in my brain that shouldn't be there? I couldn't possibly put anything in there. Like, what? Never thought anything of it. And he went on to explain, well, we don't know if it's benign or cancerous, but there's a very, very large brain tumor taking over the left side of your brain. And you'll probably never ride your bike again. And if you don't have surgery, you'll die, but there's still a chance you may die from the surgery. But if you want a shot at preserving your life, you have to have surgery immediately. Huh. So in my mind, I'm 21 by myself. I think I'm invincible, living my dream and some more than I ever imagined happening, and just can't even fathom the reality I'm in. And then I get this, in my mind, all I heard was cancer, never gonna ride your bike again. You may die. That was it. Right. And so that's started.
So your face journey. Melted off.
Yeah, it's so interesting trying to explain that feeling, just like with the different parts of the brain that like communicate versus feel things, and like. But the best way I can put it was 2 different ways. It was just like this roller coaster of emotions running through me, and just like fear and anxiety and stress and worry and doubt, and like the victim mentality of like, why me? Like, what did I do to deserve this? The best way I can put it is I just felt broken. Like I just felt utterly broken. Another way I like to explain it is like, you watch a movie and like a character gets some bad news, or like that opening scene of like Saving Private Ryan, like this ringing noise just like takes over, and like the camera slowly like zooms out, everything's like slow motion. And it was like an out of body experience, almost like I was watching my own horror movie and I'm the main star of it, yet I don't want to be. And it feels like my world's caving in.
Oh, sorry about that. So what was the progression from there?
Yeah, it was interesting. It happened pretty quick. It was about like a 2-week transition from diagnosis to surgery. And I'm out in Greenville, North Carolina, so Eastern Carolina area, and did some research and found Dr. Alan Friedman right out at Duke University, about an hour and a half west of me, where I live right out in Raleigh now, so I'm right next to Duke. But he was said to be, one of the top neurosurgeons in the world. And I went and met with him, and he said, he's like, you're lucky you fell and hit your head. Otherwise you'd be dead. Cause the way this thing, the size of this thing, and then like the symptoms you're experiencing, and it's just a matter of a month or two before you wouldn't have woken up one day. He suggested. So it was such a severe case. He actually moved patients out of his schedule to get me in sooner. And I thought that was pretty profound. Like that's how serious. Any brain tumor is serious, but the fact that the size and the effects that this thing was having over me, he thought it was necessary to get me in sooner than some other people. So I'm really grateful for that. And it was supposed to be like 4 hours, but 6.5 hours later, 75 staples, 16 stitches. I was awake, and I returned home 2 days later, and I actually started riding 5 weeks later. I didn't know it only takes 4 weeks for the skull to fuse back together. Pretty incredible.
Wow. So how did you feel at this point? And then, maybe moving ahead a little bit faster, we'll go over some of the major elements, but did you feel okay after the 5 weeks?
Yeah, it was interesting because the transition during diagnosis to surgery, there was a shift of fear to, all right, well, instead of thinking of like, what if I don't wake up? Let's focus on what if I do? What am I going to do? How am I going to do it? And why am I going to do what I want to do? And so I just kept focusing. And thankfully, I had videos of me competing and riding from video projects we had done. And I just kept watching these videos. And I was like, man, like this is what I set out to do. and I made it happen, and I'm not done. Like, I'm not done, living. I'm not done living my dream. Like, there's so much more. So it just shifted to fuel. And then come 5 weeks, it was 4 weeks. I went in, get the MRI. Everything looked okay. 4 titanium screws, they settled in nice. And he said, Dr. Freeman suggested taking another week off just to make sure we're good. And I started easing back into things. And it was just like the waking up moment was like probably one of the greatest moments of my life beyond my birth. Like, it was just like this cliche to say, but it was like a new chance at living. And I just had a new appreciation for life. It's like this perspective shift. Then come 5 weeks, when I got back on my bike again, I was like a little kid all over again, like riding a bike for the first time. But the progression from there, months on end, it was just a battle of getting my confidence back in the things I knew I could do. And then like thinking of progressing trick wise, that took about a year or two to get fully back to the point where I felt like myself again, especially like flipping and spinning after having your head cut open to manipulate your brain is a traumatic brain injury of its own. But there's just a lot of variables. So I think I was in so much pain for a year and a half prior to the surgery. When I woke up, even after the pain meds all wore off from surgery, like I hadn't had any pain anymore. And the only struggle after that, like I was so grateful for that, but the only thing after was just like that confidence to do what I knew I could do. And then some other things that I hadn't tried yet. So it was just mental at that point.
But what were the doctors telling you typically happens to people that, had or have your condition? What was the survival rate? And did they tell you that you were going to be fine from there, or that, easily relapsed?
I actually don't remember. I remember doing a lot of my own research and looking into it. And I remember just anxiously waiting to see if it was benign or cancerous, and it was said to be benign. But I don't remember what they said about other patients' outcomes. I mean, I'd have to, it's such a like faded memory of that like specific moment. Like I was just so focused on going in and coming out. But I do know they ended up testing it and it was benign. And it's one of the more common tumors that people are diagnosed with, called a meningioma. So it actually grows the meninges layer of your skull, and it was so massive that it was pushing that far into my brain. It wasn't developed in the brain itself. It was like from the meninges layer pushing that far and deep into my brain. So it made a lot of sense as to why I was experiencing what I was experiencing.
So how did you end up with, learning about the ketogenic lifestyle, and, let's bring it to today. How has your life changed since then, and why?
Oh man, it's changed in such amazing ways. Like people say, like, man, that's gotta be the worst thing that ever happened to you. I'm sorry. And it's like, no, like my perspective is I'm super grateful that it happened to me, because it shifted my entire existence. Like who I was just changed 180 degrees. And I really started to audit what I was doing in my life and what I could have done to create it. And it was after the second diagnosis, 2012, where it was just a routine scan showed 2 areas had come back. And Dr. Friedman said it was because of the original tumor wrapped around an artery in my optic nerve. They couldn't risk hitting either of them because they could have a stroke or paralyzed or died. That he said it was just residual cell growth, and to look into radiation. And I was stubborn. My mom went through radiation, colon cancer. And I was just like, man, like there's gotta be a better way. And I found gamma knife radiosurgery, which basically just zapped the 2 tumors that grew back. And for 4 years they shrunk, and they've been stable ever since. So that was the second diagnosis. And then right after that diagnosis, I started to like dive into more of holistic health. And then I found Dr. Perlmutter's book, Grain Brain, at the end of 2013. And just the things he was talking about with like blood sugar correlation to brain health and epigenetics and keto. That was the first time I ever heard of keto. That's what really shifted my perspective of food and the power I had within myself and my choices to create the best version of myself and a resilient brain and create longevity. And in my mind, I was still like, this happened twice. And I'm in this perspective of like, man, like, I don't want this to keep happening. Like maybe I'm causing it. And so I made a lot of changes. And then it wasn't until, I was living a high fat, low carb lifestyle technically, but I wasn't keto 100%. Like I was tracking macros, and I was like 100, 150 grams of carbs a day, like whole foods. But I was, under the impression, because I was an athlete, I need to make sure I had glycogen, all these things that are kind of not what I thought they were today. Right. But I was probably in a state of ketosis on and off because of my eating patterns and my training regimen. But I say I've only been keto for like 2.5 years because that's actually when I started tracking my blood. And that came after a third brain tumor diagnosis, February 2017. On the opposite side of my brain, two more popped up. So today there's four in there. They're all chilling right now, thanks to Gamma Knife and keto. But it was that third diagnosis that was like another wake up call. I was like, damn, Josh, like you gotta get your ass into gear and like get serious about this. So I was like, all right, I'm already tracking macros. I already understand this stuff. I've been learning more. Let's start testing the blood, and then let's like drop our carb sources to just non-starchy vegetables, and like let's audit, how many grams per day, and let's do some more intermittent fasting, some more prolonged fast, and that's what led me to where I am today. And because of that, this February is 2 years of scans after the third diagnosis and no progression without med, surgery, treatment. So it's really become a passion of mine and a passion to share.
Well, how much do you think the keto lifestyle has contributed to either shrinking your tumors or maintaining your health? Any observations by your doctors of surprise that things are better than they thought? Or for you, luckily, the main medical procedures are what's working?
Yeah, so I still don't have a primary. I haven't had a primary since I was a teenager. I don't want to be told to take pain meds or any kind of medication for this, or like, hey, like this, I think I'm good with what I'm doing and the people I'm following and researching their work. But yeah, here's your results, and I don't really tell them what I'm doing. Depends on the doctor. Like when I had ACL surgery in 2015, I was really clear with them with like my plan without pain meds, just diet, which that was before I was actually implementing a ketogenic diet. And I didn't really know I was doing this, but before surgery, I cut out like anything that raised blood sugar in my mind, and was 100% like I'm just eating protein and fat. And so I was probably more in a ketogenic state than I actually imagined. But I think that's why when I came out of knee surgery, my knee was half as swollen as a typical patient. And that's what allowed me to get back on my bike after ACL surgery so much sooner than a typical athlete. But yeah, as far as the life I live today and the quality of life, like I contribute everything to the ketogenic lifestyle, because one of my favorite pieces about the ketogenic lifestyle is like this level of consciousness you have to have. Like, it's not just about the foods you're eating and the macros and this and that, but it's like really when you start looking at mitochondrial health and just stressors in general, like, it's like you have to be mindful of like everything you think, do, and feel and what contributes to all of them. So I think between learning more about the subconscious mind and the conscious mind and stress and the chemicals that are released, and then how food plays such a major role in that as well, I think that's everything. And I think that's why now, with my understanding on a basic level of epigenetics and things like that, it's like, man, like there's so many pieces that are being approached from a singular focus of, the ketogenic lifestyle. And like I said, it's very complex to me. It's like that consciousness piece to all areas of life attribute to that lifestyle. And so I think that's exactly why I'm seeing the success I'm seeing with my health, and then, my quality of life in general.
So are you coaching others, or, what's your involvement with, in addition to helping yourself? What are you doing in the world of keto?
Yeah, so I'm doing a lot of things. I've been for a little over 2 years now, been supporting myself through a ketogenic health coaching business, working with clients and groups of people to help them optimize their efforts and guide them along the way and support them. And that came because after the third diagnosis in 2017, I was getting ready to compete 3 months later for the season. And I just like that third diagnosis it wasn't like the other two, where the first one was like super devastating, victim mentality. Second one, a little bit, but I was like, no, I already did it once, I can do it again. The third time, it was like, man, like, what do I do to help people, like, and help myself with this? Like, how do I spin this? And it's what I say, took me from self to purpose. And I was like, man, like competing, like no one really knows if I compete or not unless I tell them, because it's not televised anymore. It's not like a mainstream sport in America. And no one cares if I do well or not. They just care what I represent and that I'm living my life and trying to help people. And I was like, man, like competition takes so much time and effort and sacrifice. Like let's re-engineer the efforts and let's put it towards my purpose. And so I decided to walk away from competition, turn down sponsorships and doing demos, and anything that I made money in that manner, I just left behind. And I didn't have much of a plan. And then one opportunity led to another, and I started coaching an executive group. And that's just when it took off. And I was just like, man, I had to do something to support myself. Why not do that by helping people. And so today I do some coaching. I'm working on writing a book, creating an online course, and speaking. I've been speaking a little over a year, and going to places like Chile next month to speak with actually Dr. Ryan Lowry and Metabolic Health Summit. I did a little informal speech, and they told me the night before I was going to be talking. So things like that, but I got to perform there. So all the things I do today is just to share what I've learned and what I've experienced, and to help put that into different forms for people to digest and implement themselves. Because at the end of the day, my mission is to inspire new perspective that leads others to take new action. So if I can share any piece of my journey and my perspective that helps shift someone's perspective, more than just like, hey, do this diet, lose some weight, but it's more like, hey, make these shifts and you'll see your life enhance in all areas of life. It's a focus of prioritizing the brain. So that's just my objective. So everything I do today is to give back. Two of my biggest, pillars that I believe in life is growth and contribution. So the more I grow and learn, the more I want to contribute to society and help people do the same.
Well, what kind of people are you attracting? Do you attract people, again, that are athletes that just want to improve their performance, or are you attracting people that have cancer, for instance? Like, what have you noticed about the people that you interact with and you coach?
So it's a good variety of people, of course, my brain's, like in my story with the brain tumor, experiences, things like that. I get a lot of people going through similar experiences, asking, what they can do. And so I recommend resources, and I give them my advice, things like that. But, the majority of my clientele is like, like the type A executive people that are like, man, like I'm doing everything. Like, I got the job, I got the, the family, the house, the money, but like, man, like, why can't just look like, I don't know why I can't drop this weight. Like, what do I do? And, or they're like, my brain's suffering. And like, I heard a little bit about keto and, things like that. So as I just really, help them optimize. And as far as athletes, I get more, like a lot of my clients are athletic, meaning like they work out quite a bit, or they're cyclists, mountain bike riding, things like that, but not like professional. But a lot of the people that do reach out to me that are on that like competitive level of sport, more so advice, or like, hey, like I'm down to do this, I'm disciplined, but like, do you have any resources? And so I do my best to share and have conversations. But as far as my clientele, it's a lot of executives and entrepreneurs that want to maximize their efforts in terms of their brain health, because they recognize that their health is wealth. But also they're like, man, like I got all this stuff set, but like I just can't lose the weight. Like, can you help me? So in the back end of my mind, I'm like, we're going to teach you a little bit more than just how to lose weight, but how to prioritize your brain's health, so that way everything else is a ripple effect.
Any I don't know, without revealing names, but any stories that stick out at you of amazing transformations in people?
Yeah, for sure. So Miles Sullivan, he was at Metabolic Health Summit. I dragged him out there before I went on to perform when I was talking. And he reached out to me with his mom a little over a year ago, asking for advice to help control his seizures. He was looking at a third brain surgery. Surgeon wanted to remove more brain matter because that's what they thought was creating the seizures. And they'd been following me for a little bit, and were following what I was sharing about keto, and they did their own research as well. And they just wanted guidance and support. So I let them know, like, hey, like I'm not a doctor or medical professional by any means, but I'm down to help guide you and support you along the way. And so because of that, he went from 7 seizures a day, and they just started trickling down less and less per day, to when it was like a couple days a week, to maybe 1 here and there during the week. And then as of recently, he's going on 6 months without a single seizure. And he's been adhering to the ketogenic diet. And actually, when he felt one come on a couple of weeks ago, he drank a Keto Up, a canned beverage version of BHB. It's a free cell form rather than the salt form from Prove It. And he felt the seizure come on and just drank one of those, and it went away. And he had never been able to do that before. So that's one story that's really profound. And then, I got a couple other stories of different clients getting off, metformin and getting their blood sugar under 120 for the first time in years, and then being like so ecstatic they're in tears to see that. And just people, like, as like being able to just like remove a bunch of body fat and weight over time, like just seeing dramatic transformations. And them, I think my favorite part is them saying like how enjoyable and like almost effortless it was once they had the understanding of what food did, and what they needed to focus on as far as avoiding and adding in, and just learning how to optimize every effort along the way. But yeah, Miles is probably one of my favorite stories, just because he was looking at a third brain surgery and he eliminated that opportunity and that risk just by changing up his diet, when his surgeon was like, "Oh, that's so radical to do, but cutting your head open apparently isn't." So that's just one of my favorite stories to share.
Yeah, no, that's great. Do you run into cases where the person, they seem to be trying their best, but it's just not working? Or does that, people really try, like it pretty much always works to help them?
Yeah, I find that if their effort is in, then they're going to see success. And that's what I've experienced is when they're fully committed, they'll see the success that they're looking for, especially when they develop patience and they look at it as a lifestyle change, not just like, hey, in 2 weeks I can drop 10 pounds, because I let them know really what's kind of going on there. The only time I have people that I'm working with that don't see the results in the manner they're looking for, or in general, is when they're not committing and they're letting the starches and sugars sneak in, or the drinks here and there, or they're just sometimes, like I had a call today with a client, and he found out that he was using a 2 tablespoon measuring spoon rather than 1 like he thought. And so he was doing like double what we were talking about for one of his meals. And he was like, "Oh, like, man, like, I feel like if I could optimize that, then I'd see the results I'm looking for." I was like, yeah, like that's a huge win, like realizing you're doing double than what you thought, like that's pretty different. So yeah, in short, I think it's when people commit to it and they have a higher purpose than just, body composition or something like that, but it's like really their quality of life and their brain health. That's when they commit, and that's when they see the real magic happen. Otherwise, it's just when people are kind of like on the fence and kind of like, I don't know, like I haven't committed yet, like I want to. And it's like, well, when you're ready, then you'll see it take place.
Yeah. Well, very good. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you and maybe to ask about your coaching and find out more?
Yeah, so my website is just joshperrybmx.com. And then all my social media, whether it's Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff, it's just Josh Perry BMX. So I'm most active on responding via email or Instagram DM, but I do try to check all of them pretty regularly. So Josh Perry BMX.
That's great. Well, Josh, thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Richard. I appreciate the opportunity to share. And like I said, it means the world to me. And I'm glad that you got to see the performance of Metabolic Health Summit. And I'm excited for this year's event as well.
You're listening to the Future Tech Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies such as artificial intelligence, stem cells, 3D printing, gene editing, Bitcoin, blockchain, the microbiome, quantum computing, virtual reality, and exploring space are much closer than you might think. In fact, many early versions of these technologies are in play right now, and the companies that are using these technologies are the focus of this podcast. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a thorny medical problem. Remember, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and tell your friends about it. Thank you.